For Christians, the Bible is the Word of God. They have seen too many evidences to convince them of that, to have any other viewpoint of the matter. In many parts of that Word, aside from prophecies, for example, and their fulfillment, which can be so convincing, are laws of Jehovah that we learn to obey and which bring us blessings when we do. For example, when His Word makes it clear that true worshipers are not allowed to proceed in a promiscuous lifestyle, that turns out to be for our good. We not only honor God by obeying His law, but we bless ourselves by being obedient to that divine direction. But is it always that way for us? Some people would say, isn't it true that sometimes you're disadvantaged by believing that everything that the Bible says is proper direction for you? And perhaps the one area where that has been mostly brought up in Jehovah's Witnesses in recent years is in the matter of blood transfusions. We point out to people that God's Word is quite clear, Acts chapter 15, that Christians are to abstain from blood. But they say, but would you rather die than have a blood transfusion? The question they pose does not describe reality. Why should one have to die because he doesn't take a blood transfusion? I had someone here this morning telling me that a nurse told them years ago, you know, you're going to bleed, and if you keep bleeding, then you'll die. That would make me think right away, I want another surgeon. If that's the best he can do, if I'm going to bleed to that extent, where are his skills? So this is the whole point of the issue, the rather emotional attitude that people have towards something like this is usually the result of their not having all the facts in mind. And so we have to not only take them to the Bible and let them see what it says, but we also have to let them see that medically speaking, we are on a sound basis. If you'll turn now to Acts chapter 15, scripture we referred to a few moments ago, I'd like to call your attention to some things that will be very helpful to you, I believe, in discussing this with people. Although we don't have the discussion as frequently as we used to, because people aren't bringing it up so much anymore, and there's a reason for that, as we'll discuss a little farther on. But in that 15th chapter of Acts, in verses 28 and 29, the point is strongly made that it's the Holy Spirit, it says, first of all, and we ourselves, the apostles, that decided this matter. So that's one thing that guides us. This comes from a source higher than human. And then it says that they had desired to add no further burden to the Christians of that day. Now notice the last phrase in that verse, except these necessary things. So that takes out the argument that people will say, well, this is not that important. This says it's necessary. What are those necessary things? To keep abstaining from things sacrificed to idols and from blood. That's clear. And from things strangled. Now that's good to know, because some try to argue, and many clergymen and theologians say, oh, well, that prohibition on blood was when animals weren't properly trained. But did you notice this says from blood and from things strangled? Because God knew, and people of that day knew, that people drank and ate blood in these times, the Bible times. So the prohibition was on ingesting blood by any means. And then it goes on to say, and from fornication. Well, that clearly defines idolatry as out for Christians, and also fornication is out. We can't practice those things. Blood is among those things that we cannot accept as a part of our lifestyle. So when you understand that and see that expression, you realize this is God's law that is being given to us to abstain from these things, and necessary things at that. All right, that's our basic scriptural position. And it's better for us to go to Acts whenever we're explaining this to anybody, because if you go to any of the scriptures in the Hebrew portion of the Bible, right away people will say, well, that's the Old Testament. They sort of push it to one side, not applying to Christians. But if you start off here in Acts, you see, you have the matter nailed down, as it were. And the opening expression about this being the direction of the Holy Spirit takes it out of the realm of mere human interpretation. But, you know, you can prove the reasonableness of any direction by the fruitage that it produces. Now, what fruitage has been produced by our taking a firm position on this scripture and abstaining from blood? Have we been disadvantaged? Have we paid a heavy price for it? Yes, in a way we have, but it wasn't our fault. In the 60s, it's true that some of Jehovah's Witnesses died on the operating table or in their room because they didn't take a blood transfusion. But that was not their fault. The fault was with the medical team that did not take steps to keep that from happening. Could they have kept it from happening? Yes. And medical history in recent years proves that that is the case. You see, when they took the unscriptural and unscientific position that only blood would save a life, they were so adamant in that, so fanatical, which they tried to charge us with being, that they overlooked many other things possible for them. And many doctors have since proved that to be the case. Let me give you a quick example. There's a urologist at Long Island College Hospital in New York, Dr. Cyril Godek, who has done for years radical prostatectomies, including those involving cancer. And for some time, witnesses came to him for surgery, and he said, well, we can't do it without blood. You must have blood. This is a very bloody operation. Well, it is, in the sense that there can be tremendous blood loss. But finally, he said, we sat down with our team, and we examined our procedure, and we said, where are we losing blood? Is it here in the initial stages? No. Final stages? No. Here in the middle? No. What about here? Ah, yes. There in this one stage is where we're losing great amounts of blood. So the next question was, now what can we do to limit that? And he said, we found a way. And now he does radical prostatectomies without blood transfusion. He's written articles on it in the medical literature, and the thing is ready, and more urologists are able to do this. The impossible is now being done. And they say it is a better surgery for the patient because without a blood transfusion, the immune system is not suppressed, and the patient gets well sooner. It's been demonstrated that witness patients are now spending from a half-day in intensive care following surgery of all kinds, and going home a day to a day and a half sooner than other patients. Doctors noticed that many years ago in the 70s, and we all thought it was because Jehovah's Witnesses generally are fairly healthy people because we lead a lifestyle that's not abusive for the most part, and so we're in pretty good shape when we go to surgery. But also the fact that we do not smoke was a boon. You know that doctors are now telling patients who are going for surgery, don't smoke for 2 or 3 weeks, you'll heal faster. And they do. Because the smoking produces carbon monoxide in the tissue and inhibits healing, it inhibits oxygen getting to the blood, to the tissues. So really this was a benefit to us. But in more recent years, they discovered that it is a blood transfusion that suppresses the immune system because the immune system is fighting this foreign substance that's been introduced into your body. And it's so busy with that, and it can't handle infections, etc. And a hospital is the best place in town to get the widest choice of infections. They all accumulate there. And doctors are very worried about that because the surgery can go beautifully, the patient can be getting well, get an infection, finished. Many patients have died from post-surgical infection. So now they know that. And the way they discovered it was they had throat cancer and lung cancer patients who were dying following surgery. Others weren't. And they studied why. And they kept coming up, the ones that didn't get a blood transfusion, but the ones least likely to have a recurrence as well as survival. That is, they had the most survival and the least likelihood of recurrence of the cancer. And at first they wouldn't believe it, it just didn't match up. But then they found it true with breast cancer, colon cancer. In every case of cancer surgery, the patient who doesn't get a transfusion has the greatest likelihood of not having that cancer recur. So then they realized it's the suppression of the immune system that brings that problem for them. So you see, Jehovah's Witnesses were blessed, and as Dr. Godek said, and I heard him make this statement publicly to a whole group of doctors, he said, we didn't know how to deal with this. We didn't know how to do this until we put the Jehovah factor into the equation and then everything came out. So you can see that doctors are beginning to appreciate that our position has caused them to find other and better ways to do their surgery. They would never have had to think of it otherwise. Dr. Spence, a well-known American surgeon who has done so much for us over the last 2 decades, said to us once, I never would have thought of trying bloodless surgery because we had blood and we used it traditionally, and so you just used it, and we never thought. Nothing impelled us to search out other possibilities. But when you people came along and said no blood, now we had to study the matter. And now that we have, he said, you know what is happening? Medicine is changing. Now we are talking about blood conservation, how not to lose so much blood during surgery, how to be more meticulous in the surgical techniques of the doctors, with the result that if you don't lose it, you don't have to replace it. And the patient can recover without it. And so he said, this is going to be a new specialty in medicine, bloodless medicine and surgery. He also said, the community owes a debt of gratitude to Jehovah's Witnesses for having helped medicine to see this and turn around the now doing. Well, how did Jehovah's Witnesses cope with this matter? Did they just leave it to whatever might develop? No, it's very interesting to us that the governing body of Jehovah's Witnesses some years ago decided that we needed to do more to help the brothers when they faced confrontations over the blood transfusion issue. And so they had heard what we had been doing up here in Canada since about 1970 in relating to doctors, providing them with medical articles to show them what other doctors were doing, and also having someone like elders there on the scene whenever there was a problem, so that someone who was not directly involved could more reasonably talk with the doctors. And that was the idea conceived of having hospital liaison committees. It's a blessing to you to have those brothers on hand whenever you have to go into the surgery. And the reason for this is no matter what you say beforehand, I'm going to say this, I'm going to tell the doctor that, and that's all well and good. You should sort of go over that in your mind and be prepared mentally. But when it happens, you're not yourself. Your emotions get whipped up, and sometimes you're not able to express it. But a hospital liaison committee member can come at it objectively. It's not his immediate personal problem. And so he can talk with the doctor in such a way as to help the doctor appreciate what should be done. Besides, it was not the time or the opportunity to train every publisher and every congregation in medical matters. But we could select certain elders who were capable men and train them, and they could talk to the doctors for us and reason with them as to what should be done. Now, how has that worked out? Very well. In fact, we now have around the earth some 1,400 hospital liaison committees, 7,000 elders. The program is operating in all of our branches, and they have done a magnificent job of getting to be acquainted with doctors and working with them by providing them medical articles that will help them in looking after us and other patients, for that matter. Now, this task of educating the worldwide medical community was a challenging one. And when we first took it on, some brothers even said it was not good for us to use the expression that we would re-educate the doctors. But we boldly went ahead with that idea. Grasping the concept was a challenge, but carrying it out was a greater one. But faith can move mountains, and our faith certainly demonstrated that. We formed then, well, the governing body formed back there in January of 1988, Hospital Information Services. Now, what was it to do? Well, just what its name indicated. The term hospital indicates it would be related to that scene of human activity. Information Services said, we're going to inform doctors and hospital staff on what can be done in behalf of Jehovah's Witnesses. What we told doctors when we made presentations to them was, we want to help you to help us. And that seemed to win their affection because they realized we wanted to work with them. We weren't fighting them. But you know, we did have to destroy many misconceptions and misunderstandings about Jehovah's Witnesses. One of the brothers from our department, talking to a doctor once, explained, we're not like Christian Scientists or some Pentecostals. We don't believe in faith healing. We go to doctors. In fact, where do these confrontations occur? At hospitals, because we've gone for medical treatment. We haven't tried to avoid it. That's the perfect answer, by the way, to those who say, would you rather die than have a blood transfusion? If we'd rather die, we'd stay home, not go to the hospital. It's as obvious as that. If we've gone to the hospital, we want medical attention. So these brothers who made these visits found, as one did from our department, that oftentimes doctors are surprised to hear us say that we don't believe in some of these things that others do. And so he said, now let me get this straight. You're not Christian Scientists, no? You're sure? And the brother said, yes, I'm sure. Well, he said, that's going to raise a lot of eyebrows around this house. You see the point? They put us in that category of religious fanatics who don't want medical attention. It never dawns on them, well then why are we on your doorstep? So once you clear away some of those things, they begin to come around. Then, of course, there's the exasperating thing of, well, what do we do if we can't use blood? There's where we began to provide for them articles out of the medical literature itself to show them what not only can be done, but what is being done. For example, Dr. Denton Cooley, who does open heart and other types of heart surgery, has since the 1950s been doing that type of surgery without a blood transfusion. He does some with blood transfusion, but for Jehovah's Witnesses, no blood. I saw him again after meeting him earlier, saw him as recently as January of 1995 at a medical conference. He came over and spoke and he said, Mr. Rosam, in view of all that I've done for the witnesses over the years, do you think the Watchtower would be willing to make me an honorary member? He wasn't serious, but it was his way of saying, you know, we work together, we're friends, we get along, we understand one another. And he has taught this method of surgery without blood to so many doctors. Down in South America, in both Brazil and in Argentina, I met heart surgeons who said they were trained by Cooley. They know exactly what to do without blood. So you see, this is spreading among the medical profession. Also there at that medical conference was a doctor who was an orthopedic surgeon, a professor of orthopedic surgery at the University of Arkansas. And he comes to mind because I can remember some years ago going to orthopedic hospital down here in downtown Toronto and having doctors there tell me, you will never do hip replacement without blood. Can't do that. You have to realize when you cut through the bone, there's tremendous bleeding. Well, Nelson was doing it and continues to do it and has trained many other orthopedic surgeons to do it. And that is spreading now. Many orthopedists are doing hip replacement, scoliosis surgery, back problems, etc., without blood transfusion. We had one doctor in the States who works at a very prestigious hospital where children can get free medical attention because it's supported by the fabulous wealth of the DuPonts. And he was so conscientious about what he does. He said, when I do your children for scoliosis to straighten the back, when I take some bone from the pelvic area to transplant it up to the spine where I have to make a fusion, I keep that in saline solution and move it up the spine, always touching the bone so that it never leaves the body. Well, we explained to him he didn't have to be that conscientious. That was nice of him, but he could take it out and put it in. This was bone, but he just wanted to be sure he treats us. And when you see doctors of the highest caliber, we're not talking about your everyday surgeon, but surgeons of the highest caliber be so conscientious, so friendly, so willing to help, then you realize that by taking the position we have, we've eliminated all the ones who can't do it well and gotten to the top. And that has been a blessing to us in many, many situations. I say this respectfully, not disrespectfully. There are surgeons and there are surgeons. Just like there are auto mechanics and there are auto mechanics. And there are bakers and there are bakers, you know. They don't all produce the same quality. And this is true of doctors. But by holding to the scriptural position that we do, we come across the best doctors who can help us. And time and again they admit the key to it all is meticulous surgery. I talked with a doctor, an Iranian in Germany, in Bonn, and he's a very devout Muslim. He said, all my surgery I do to praise God. And he sincerely meant that. He really loves to help his fellow man. And he explained that he can do surgery without blood transfusion because he said, if you study anatomy, which most doctors today don't do enough of, You know where all the blood vessels are, where all the organs are, and you're not likely to accidentally cut one and get a bleeding episode. And you know where they are, and you tie them off. As he said, it's as simple as that. But you know what surgeons themselves say? There are doctors who are hackers. They go in cutting and let the blood flow because we've got more to put in, as if blood were entirely harmless and innocent. And for many years they were convinced blood was harmless, as long as you got the right matching type. But now they recognize it's worse than that. The Health Ministry in British Columbia here in Canada has published an item in which they list more than 40 blood-borne pathogens. So you know, and most people know, there's HIV in the blood supply. Certainly here in Canada, you know there's hepatitis C, because you have here the national scandal of 60,000 hemophiliacs who now have hepatitis C from tainted blood. But there are other things in blood. One they're worried about right now that's come up from South America and gotten into the blood supply is Chagas disease. And one they're really concerned about, because there's no test for it, is the human version of the mad cow disease. Britain right now, they're not using any blood donated in Britain because they really have a bad situation with it there. They've been able to trace some cases of Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease, as it's officially called, CJD, to donors who had it but didn't know they had it. It can lie dormant in your organism for 20 years. But it's there, and you can transfuse it to someone else. So there are all of these frightening things with blood that tell us that when Jehovah had his word say, abstain from blood, he was protecting his people. He was looking out for us. He wasn't giving us a religious belief that would kill us, as some try to charge. Relatives would often say that. You kill your adherents. You kill your children. It's a form of suicide. All of this flack that we put up with for years. But now the tide is turning, and other things are beginning to be recognized about the wisdom there is in abstaining from blood. I mentioned a few minutes ago the medical conference that I attended in Dallas back in 1955, January. There was a collection of doctors like Dr. Nelson, that I mentioned, the orthopedic surgeon from the University of Arkansas, Dr. Cooley, Dr. Spence, and others. There was a doctor there from National Institutes of Health. And the editor of the American Journal of Surgery was there, Dr. Hiram Polk. And he made a rather interesting statement at the end of the conference. He didn't want to come because he knew some of Jehovah's Witnesses would be there, and he didn't like Jehovah's Witnesses. He thought they were religious fanatics. But they convinced him to come. He came. He gave the last talk at that conference, and in it he said, I have learned something. I'm a doctor, but I've learned from this conference. For example, I did not know that when you give this synthetic erythropoietin, which can stimulate red cell production from the bone marrow and hence get your oxygen back up into tissues, recover from a low blood count or a form of anemia. He said, I didn't know that when you give erythropoietin, you also have to give iron. Give the erythropoietin something to work with, but I know that now. And something else I learned, he said. I was talking to my wife last night on the phone, telling her how the conference was going, about when she could expect me on. And I said, you know, there were 2 of Jehovah's Witnesses here. If I had listened to those men for 5 more minutes, I would have come home as one of Jehovah's Witnesses. We offered him 5 minutes later. But again, like Cooley, he wasn't serious. He was just trying to say, my eyes were open. I didn't have you people pegged right. I had misconceptions about you. And his whole attitude changed. And the result of that was that the American Journal of Surgery in December following published this supplement to the American Journal of Surgery from a consensus conference that was held, directed by Dr. Spence. And there are in here 13 articles from the medical literature showing what can be done without blood in many different specialties of medicine. This has been a real boon, because we went to the editor and talked about getting reprints to distribute around the world. And so we got in touch also with a pharmaceutical company who would be benefited by this as well as us, because they produce erythropoietin. And we told them both we wanted to make additional copies. How many do you want? We had counted up what we could use in our hospital information services departments all over the world for these 7,000 elders on our committee. We could go out and deliver these personally to doctors they personally know and are working with. We said we need 25,000. They about fell off their chairs. But they did it. And in 2 weeks, this journal was in the remotest parts of the earth in the hands of doctors. And Dr. Polk is now quite proud of this because no other medical journal has ever reprinted a supplement to that figure, to that number. So he's become famous among his colleagues. And I saw Dr. Spence just recently in Moscow, and he said, Dr. Polk still talks about you. It was very good. So he's been impressed. Other things that have come along that show where this is all going was this that appeared, and some of you probably saw this, in a supplement to Time magazine back, well, this is a special issue it said for the fall. And among other articles in here showing what doctors are doing these days in making great strides in medicine was one that, you find it here, deals with bloodless medicine and surgery done at Inglewood Hospital in New Jersey, right across the way from New York. This was the article here. It's a 3-page article. And it shows, among other things, this gamma ray knife, as they call it, though it isn't actually a knife. It's rays that are sent into the brain or other areas where there are tumors to shrink them or to zap them, to destroy them. And it's non-invasive and bloodless. So that's one of the approaches that can be used. But they have developed many others. Dr. Shander, pictured here, is the head anesthesiologist there. And he says anything we can do with blood, we can do without blood. It's not a matter of blood making the difference. In fact, you know what some doctors are saying now? Don't count don't give the blood count. Doesn't matter what the blood count is. What's the patient like? Because we've had brothers and sisters down to 4 grams, 3 grams of hemoglobin, and they're sitting up in bed talking, and doctors can't believe it. Because up until a few years ago, they had said anytime you go below 10 grams of hemoglobin, you can't transfuse, the patient's going to die, it's too late. But the National Institutes of Health held a conference a few years back, and they destroyed that completely. Dr. Zauber, in fact, had a presentation at that conference that the title of his article was a question. He said, where did we get the magic number of 10? And then they explained that this was just something traditional in medicine. There were no scientific studies to prove it, but they always said 10. We now have patients who have gone down to 2, 1.8 grams of hemoglobin and survived. Now, we don't recommend that. We're not saying that's what every witness should have to do. It is risky, there's no question. But what we are saying is this. It is not that established figure. In medicine, you can't do that. There's no one-size-fits-all in medicine. Every patient is different, depending on his own state of health and the other factors. So they have found that out. We also got reprints of these with permission from Time magazine, and we've distributed this in 25,000 or more copies around the world. In Britain, for a long time we had some problems because Britain has socialized medicine too, but much more restrictive in a way than here in Canada, because there you take whatever doctor is on duty. You can't choose your doctor like you do here, and you must go to this hospital where you live. You can't pick and choose to go to another one. Well, they make exceptions in unusual circumstances, but normally you take what you get, so to speak. And that produced a lot of problems for us. And yet, it's interesting to know that the first hospital in Britain that advertised itself as a bloodless medicine and surgery center was a very large government hospital, not a private clinic. We thought it would be a private clinic, mostly where doctors decide for themselves. But eventually, the Royal College of Surgeons of England published this booklet called Code of Practice for the Surgical Management of Jehovah's Witnesses. And in here they explain what you can do for Jehovah's Witnesses about blood. Now, if that's as few pages as it took to tell doctors what they could do, obviously, this isn't really a big challenge or that odd at all. We're not asking them to do something that unusual when we say you are a surgeon without blood. And what they did in here was to copy exactly the surgical techniques that we provide for doctors when we talk to them. One of the things that we do in our presentations is to leave with them this folder, Jehovah's Witnesses Non-Blood Medical Management, and it has, among other things in it, a collection of medical articles that show them that in the most difficult and challenging types of surgery, they can do it without blood transfusions. But we also have a collection of articles that deal with, the word escapes me, don't get old, words don't stay with you. Strategies, there it is. Strategies for avoiding and controlling hemorrhage and anemia without blood transfusion. It's 2 pages that list all the things you can do, the surgical devices and techniques, the operative and anesthetic techniques, and so on. And so they found out, yes, there are many things that they can do. And one of them here that has been done, and Dr. Spence did it, is what this article calls pancreaticoduodenectomy. Hard to say. But if you learn to say Nebuchadnezzar, you can learn to say Nebuchadnezzar. We asked one surgeon, how difficult is that to do? Because you have to go in through the back to get to where the pancreas is to deal with this. And he said it's the closest thing to an autopsy. That's just about as sensitive as it is. And yet Dr. Spence has done that. Doctors also call that impossible. Could never be done, would never be done. It's being done. And so great strides have been made in the medical field. And you had some of them beginning to be made here. Last November, 3rd and 4th, we've had the conference that was held here by the government on building a blood system for the 21st century, because the results of the Creever investigation indicated that the blood that transmitted hepatitis C to these 60,000 hemophiliacs was tainted blood, and that the Red Cross knew it was tainted. And that's why they've moved the Red Cross out of the blood business in Canada. Oh, they did it very tactfully, as if they volunteered to leave it to the government, but the fact was, behind the scenes, no, you'll never touch blood again in Canada, because these people were responsible. That's why they rushed to the courts to keep Creever from announcing names of anybody involved in this scandal. But the Supreme Court said, no, that's part of his job. So you have now hemophiliacs who have come together to lodge a class action suit against the Red Cross for, I think it's $3.5 billion to compensate patients who have gotten hepatitis C. See, once you get hepatitis C, your life will shorten. You may survive, many do not. Many end up with liver in such a state that they can't survive. But at least they are left weakened, debilitated. Many can't work any longer. Their thinking processes don't work too well. And, well, you're just never the same person after hepatitis C. So it's a very bad thing. These are the proceedings of that gathering back last November. But interestingly, they asked Jehovah's Witnesses to be there and to make presentation and help them, because they knew that now you can do many things without blood transfusion. So why have the problem with collecting, storing, matching blood, keeping it safe, testing it, when you can do things without blood? So they asked Hospital Information Services here in Canada to give them information on bloodless medicine and surgery. So the last 30 pages of this publication is a submission from HI in Canada, and Jehovah's Witnesses are well represented here. It says that this is compiled by Hospital Information Services for Jehovah's Witnesses. And so now the government is distributing information like this. We're also going to get thousands of copies of this to distribute around the world. Just recently we heard from a doctor who had gotten this from one of our hospital liaison committee members, and he said, with this, my talk at the next medical conference I'm attending is already prepared. I'm going to use this. This, he said, is a gift from heaven. So you see how willing doctors are to get information. Let me be very frank with you. The average doctor who has a good practice simply does not have the time to do medical research. Fact of life. We do it for them. We provide it for them, and they're very grateful. One doctor in South America, an anesthesiologist, helped us in a difficult case, and afterwards when the brother said, you know, how much do we owe you? Because he had come from another hospital to this one to fill in for an anesthesiologist who refused to do it. And down there, if you function outside of the hospital where you're assigned by the government, then they have to be paid. Not a patient. He said, you don't owe me anything. Just don't leave me off your list of doctors that you send these medical records to. He recognized that this saved him time and money. The results continue to accrue. The results are showing up in many areas. This is an American Red Cross publication in May of 1989, Transfusion Medicine Topic Update. And the big headline you see there is Alternatives to Blood Fusion. You know, nobody used that expression before Jehovah's Witnesses did. We first used it in 1970, but there were alternatives to blood. Now they are using that. In a publication of the American Hospital Association called AHA News, there was an article that appeared back in 1996 called Against the Flow. I'm going to read you the first two sentences of the article because they really tell you the whole thing. What started as religious belief is evolving into medical preference and advanced technology. See what they did? Next sentence. Bloodless medicine and surgery, motivated in part by the doctrines of Jehovah's Witnesses, is moving far beyond the needs of a spiritual society into operating rooms nationwide. In other words, it's becoming the norm, the practice now, to do things without blood. And so I think you brothers can see that indeed Jehovah has blessed the work of the hospital liaison committees and that of the hospital information services departments in the branches around the world, because we're looked at totally different today from what was the case back in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. The picture has changed so much that some doctors now say we are their best source of information. I just came back a week or so ago from Russia, where two of us from Hospital Information Services in Brooklyn attended a medical conference. The first day was all on bloodless medicine and surgery. And at the first sessions we had around 900 doctors present, and over 500 of them signed up to receive additional information. They want to be on our list of cooperative doctors. And sometimes I noticed there were as many as 4 waiting in line. That is, there were about 4 lines up to a table where they could sit down and register. And they were 4 and 5 times waiting for their turn to go in and to sign up, as it were. So in Russia now, there's a tremendous interest in bloodless medicine and surgery because the doctors know and the government knows their blood supply is definitely not safe. The economic situation is such that they can't afford the equipment, the expensive equipment needed for testing. Of course, all these countries can afford military equipment, etc., but not medical supplies, etc. Sadly, there are some hospitals in Russia where they don't even have gauze or alcohol. They're that strict of basics. But they're quite interested in learning what can be done without blood and say that this is the answer to many of their problems, and they believe Jehovah's Witnesses can be of help to them. The doctor who opened the conference is the leading hematologist in all of Russia. He was the Minister of Health for a number of years. And when he opened up the conference, he said, I've been asked to make a statement on the efficacy of blood transfusions. And he did. He said, my experience tells me that what most doctors worry about, the lack of oxygen due to the lack of red blood cells, due to bleeding, due to anemia, is not what kills patients. He said, I have never seen a patient die from lack of oxygen, but I have seen many patients die from a lack of volume, when the veins collapse and the patient goes into shock. But he said, we have volume expanders to take care of that. And then he added, you know, I have seen so many patients die from bad reactions to blood that we couldn't save after that reaction, that there aren't enough of you in this auditorium to represent each one of them. So that would be more than 900 in his career. So you see, the people who were dying with blood transfusions quite likely greatly outnumbered any witnesses who were claimed to have died without blood transfusions. And so that fact is coming home. Doctors are still realizing what can be done. I talked to the Institute for Hematology in Ukraine a month or so ago, and at the end of that conference, the head of the institute said, from what we've learned in the last few years about the dangers of blood and what we heard here today, I'm announcing that from here forward, this institute will be practicing blood conservation. We will not use transfusions as we have in the past. And one of the doctors who talked to the 120, 130 doctors who were there that day had said to one of the brothers from the Ukraine, Bethel, you know, I read that information you gave me, it was in the blood brochure, and I've been praying to God to forgive me that I have given blood transfusions. I didn't know that this was wrong. And so my hope is that on Judgment Day, when I stand before God, he will exonerate me for what I did in ignorance. Humble level. And then he said, I have vowed to God I will never again give a blood transfusion. Isn't that interesting? How are doctors looking at what we're doing otherwise? I think I can squeeze a few of these in here. One doctor recently in Sweden said to one of the witnesses, maybe you don't know it, but actually you are the ones who got bloodless surgery started. The head of a clinic said to one of the brothers, I have one objection to what you're doing. You speak about these alternatives as if it was something special to be used in connection with Jehovah's Witnesses. I think this should be done to all patients. See what's coming. Another one said, in my opinion, it's embarrassing that there's even a need for you to preach about this. All that you say is true, but actually is really what should be natural for us at all hospitals. Another one said, we have a very fine cooperation with Jehovah's Witnesses. The articles they provide save me a tremendous amount of time. And I think I can squeeze in another couple here that I think you'll find of interest as well. What some doctors have said, oh yes, here we are, from Nigeria. One of them said, you are doing a fine job, keep it up. Every doctor who is interested in growing in his career cannot help but value your efforts because it enriches our knowledge and broadens our outlook. Amazing. Another one said, your educational work has in no small way altered my entire perception and attitude toward Jehovah's Witnesses' informed objection to blood therapy. See what he called it, an informed objection. Thank you very much for your contribution to my medical knowledge. Another one said, and I think this was somewhat outstanding, Hospital Information Services is a project that will not only benefit the witnesses and health practitioners alone, but the entire human race. Now, was he exaggerating a bit? No, because he said many untimely deaths caused by complications of blood transfusion would be totally eradicated. Your project is a project that no one should wish to die. So they want us to keep up the work that has been done. One said finally, there is no doubt that our experience will benefit even non-witnesses. We look forward to a time when the entire medical profession will look at blood transfusion as a regrettable mistake of the past. So brothers, indeed, a re-education of doctors has occurred, and Jehovah's Word has truly been vindicated as giving us good direction. And that is what we should expect. Psalm 19 puts it nicely. And with this I'll have to conclude because we do want to have a watchtower. Psalm 19 verse 7 says, the law of Jehovah is perfect. Well, if it's perfect, then it can't be wrong, can't be unscientific, it can't be harmful. But a lot of people have said, your religion kills people. But this says, the law of Jehovah is perfect, bringing back the soul. It saves people. Brothers, think about it just for a minute. We've all been spared of the ravages of AIDS and hepatitis and many other things by this position on blood. We don't have to worry about those things like some people do. Imagine right now in the United States, they're having a look back, as they call it, from 1991 back. Anybody that had a blood transfusion is supposed to go in for a blood test to see if they have hepatitis or AIDS. That's millions. Millions. And we've been spared. So we should be thankful to Jehovah for that. That's why he goes on to say the reminder of Jehovah is trustworthy, making the inexperienced one wise. So, okay, we're not medically trained, we're not all of us doctors, some are, but God's law can make inexperienced people in any field wise in the sense that it gives us proper and beneficial guidance and direction. So I think we're all grateful to Jehovah, to his word, and to his modern-day organization that we have received direction and instruction on how to cope with this, and that an organizational arrangement was set up, deal with the medical profession directly, and get this problem out of the way, get necessary medical treatment for our brothers, and not violate God's law.